Hi, I'm John, and in this video today, we're going to be taking a look at how to fix a failed watercolor painting. Now, this isn't original to me, of course. Many other watercolorists have shown this. The great watercolorist Tom Lynch also stresses this. So what I want to do is give you a look at a picture that I did a number of years ago, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, I don't remember, that I just really haven't been happy with. So here's the picture. Now, I should say, I believe I did this one following Frank Clark, who's a TV watercolorist. He's from Ireland, and he had done this picture. And, I've kind of had it for a lot of years, and I really don't care much for it. And I think the reason I don't like it is because the values, there's not enough difference in the values here. Now, usually when a painting fails, there's a few reasons. One is composition. Now, there's not much I can do about the composition and not much you can do with a failed watercolor painting because you already have the composition nailed down. Another reason that they fail is center of interest. And of course, that's very related to the composition. So sometimes, we're going to see if we can bring out the composition and the center of interest a little better. But really with watercolors, especially looking back at my own, and I think for many beginner watercolorists, is that the values, there's not enough difference in the values. And for the most part with watercolor, it is you didn't go deep enough, or that I didn't have enough contrast between the highest and the lowest. So what I'm going to do is we're now going to switch over to a video that I made. And I will say this is the first time that I'm trying this new camera and this method. I've actually never painted, on video before. So, of course, I've been painting for many years. So this will be a new thing. So, bear with me if there's some little bumps in the road in the video. But hopefully it'll show you my way of thinking and how I tried to, bring out the contrast especially, and maybe even this give us a little better center of interest. So let's get to the painting. Now I want to say just at the beginning, this was done on terrible watercolor paper. This was really cheap watercolor paper. Bought it at a closeout store. I do not recommend it. So you'll see it's very hard to blend things because it just soaks right into the paper. I think the paper had no sizing on it at all. So, even if you're trying to save money and you're buying, not buying cotton paper, which I totally understand. I do a lot of things on pulp paper, especially sketchbook kind of things. Don't buy the really, really cheap stuff. Strathmore is pretty decent. That's a brand that I tend to use. And I'm sure there's other fine ones, but it wasn't this one. So I think you can see I did a little phthalo blue in the sky, and now I'm doing a little bit of ultramarine because I want to really push those falls back so you can see that it's a series of waterfalls. Because I think these were man-made, but in this particular reservoir, that's how they worked. And then, now here I'm trying to improve the composition a little bit. I want us to go back and look at those houses up on the top. That's really the center of interest. Now, obviously, I can't change the whole painting at this point. So I'm trying to maybe draw your eye a little bit. So I've created, it's almost a road with the shine of the water there at the bottom. So I'm hoping that just like we've all seen pictures of, country roads or highways, where it'll draw you up towards the falls there. And then hopefully we'll bounce up the falls and we'll see those houses up there. Now, the mixture I'm using here, and I use it really pretty much for the whole rest of the picture, is my go-to dark. And my go-to dark is ultramarine blue mixed with burnt umber. That gives a nice kind of a grayed out dark without having to resort to black. And in fact, if you use these two pigments and you use them really strong, like almost straight from the tube, you can get really, really close to black. There's other good black mixtures. I found like an orange with phthalo blue works really well, and that gets really dark. Now what I'm trying to do here also is add a little depth. So I'm trying to put some shadows. You saw me do it on the right side there, where I put some shadows behind that tree. And then I put some shadows by the house on the left there too, just to push those cottages or houses way back in the distance there. And the same thing I'm doing here. Now I'm trying to create some planes on my painting here by using mostly burnt umber. I think I dulled it a little bit with some ultramarine there. And to start to push back those bushes there, to separate the foliage a little bit. Maybe like a little more dark under the base especially at the sides there. I want to put some dark at the sides there, hoping that you don't wander off the page too much. Now, the rocks before were a real good idea, or a good example of not having enough contrast. Those rocks just, they were kind of one big blobby area and there was no contrast. So just by adding a few lines, I think we start to get a little bit more dimensionality dimension into our painting. And one thing to say about watercolor too is watercolor always dries lighter. And there I'm putting a little bank up there to kind of push everything back a little bit into the distance. But watercolor always dries lighter. So when you paint in acrylics and occasionally oils, more so with acrylics dry darker. When you're trying to get the highlight, you have to go over it several times. So if you want white on a wave, you have to hit it more than once, and sometimes with oils as well. I've worked with those as well. With watercolor, usually the trick is you have to darken your darks more than once. It's not going to work. Sometimes you don't get it as dark as you like the first pass, and that's okay. Again, the beauty of watercolor is it dries so quickly, or you can easily hit it with a hairdryer if you want to do it quicker. I don't always recommend setting it on a radiator. I've done that, but sometimes if it's really, really wet and you set it on a radiator, what happens is it'll dry unevenly, like the lines of the radiator may show through. So that's just a little bit of advice or mistakes I've made. Oh, another mistake I made many years ago, don't put it in the microwave. You got to be careful about that because some of the watercolor paper will kind of get like a brown stain on it, even if everything's clean in your microwave or put it on a clean plate. I don't recommend that. Just hit it with a hairdryer and that's no problem. Now, what you see me doing here is I'm putting a little bit more shadow on that cottage on the left because I guess I'm most interested in those three kind of right in the middle of the painting. And that may be bad composition right there too, that you don't usually want your center of interest right in the middle of a painting. But there's not a whole lot I can do to correct that. About the only thing we could do to fix that is maybe if I got a specialty cut mat or I cut a mat myself and then I could maybe move some things around and try and maybe bump those cottages. I'd probably bump them a little bit to the right. But again, that would narrow the whole painting also. We'd have to think about whether we want to do that or not. So right now I'm just touching up because I think it really needed a little bit more of the branchiness. And you got to be careful at this stage. I do too, that we want to put more line work in, but we don't want it to be like completely cartoony. Frank always puts a bird in his painting. Frank Clark, if you've ever seen him. He's just wonderful to watch. He's just so relaxing and pleasant. I guess all the TV painters are. That's kind of, maybe they got it all from Bob Ross, that they want to have that pleasant personality. So now I bumped in a little few more details on the houses back there, to really, so you can tell like underneath the eaves and separate them a little bit. Just with some dark. And again, you'll see almost everything I did here was that ultramarine blue. And now you can see I'm just kind of putting a little more sparkle on the water using some white gouache. So let's take a look at the two paintings side by side. So there's the original on the left. Kind of washed out and not a lot of contrast. Then if we come over to the one on the right, what I'm hoping is definitely there's a lot more contrast. I mean, no doubt it's a much richer painting. And I would say, too, that when you photograph these, the camera, it's making some of the blues look a little bluer. And when you see it in person, the blues aren't quite as vibrant as that, which is okay, just so they don't look quite as garish. But hopefully you can see on the right, a lot more contrast. You can really see the planes of the painting, I think, a lot better. To me, those houses look a lot further back than they did before. And then hopefully we've improved the composition a little bit, by having that water in the kind of the bright spot of the water down at the bottom of the page, hopefully leading you through the page back to those houses there. Now, is this a great painting? No, I'm not saying that. But I do like it a lot better after doing this fixing on it. So I think a good way or a good philosophy to approach this with is that when you have these failed paintings, you can't lose. We're already not happy with it. We can't really make it that much worse. And if you do, there's always the back side of the paper. So I encourage you, to give it a go yourself. Find a failed painting, drag out the watercolors. Don't have watercolors, get some, you can water down some acrylics, or this would work with acrylics or oils. Put another layer, put another glaze or two over them, and see if you can improve your composition or improve your contrast or lead the eye more towards the center of interest. So if you got something out of this video, or maybe you have some comments on paintings that you've tried to fix or had some success fixing a failed painting, please let us know in the comments below. And thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.